Hello and welcome back to Just Follow Joy. My name's Ariana, not Joy, and I'm a human design guide and teacher. And I'm so stoked to share today's episode with you because it is all about something called the Venus sequence, which comes from the Gene Keys system. And we're learning about it from 6'2" sacral generator and Gene Keys expert. He doesn't call himself that, but I definitely call him that, Jay Cohen. So I told Jay when we were recording this that this has honestly been one of my favorite episodes to record, not just because the Venus sequence is so deep and powerful and transformational, and it can be in multiple areas of your life, but the reason I loved it is because Jay is so good at explaining this stuff. He is very down to earth, wise, typical like 6-line learned wisdom kind of person. He has gate 56 multiple times in his chart, so he's a fantastic storyteller, uses great metaphors and examples, and I'm just so excited to share him with you. And before we dive in, I just want to say that if you like this episode, if you like Just Follow Joy, or if you love Just Follow Joy, it would be so helpful if you could like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to this in podcast form on any of the platforms you listen on. If you could leave a 5-star rating and review, that would be very, very helpful to get the show out in front of other people who like and love it and can learn from it. That being said, that's it from me. I will stop blabbing and we will dive in and hear from Jay. Okay, so we have Jay here with us. Jay, I'm so excited. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Jay is incredibly knowledgeable about gene keys. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that we have covered what the gene keys are, the basics of it. We've talked about the activation sequence. But I wanted to dive into something in particular that I've been finding so cool, which is the Venus sequence. And actually, when I reached out to Jay, I was just like, you can talk about whatever the fuck you want to talk about. I don't care. Like, I think all of this is cool. And he said, what about the Venus sequence? And that lit my sacral up. So I was like, let's do it. So I guess we just dive in. And without really getting into the spheres yet, what is the Venus sequence for people who don't know? Like, what does it represent? What does it tell us about ourselves? And then why is it so important for us to know and use?
Yeah, so I'm going to zoom out even a step further than that, which is like, where does the Venus sequence fit in kind of the gene keys overall, right? So when you go to genekeys.com and you get your free profile, you'll see 3 different color spheres. And this thing makes up what's called the golden path, which is kind of the suggested way that you move through or work with your different gene keys. And the Venus sequence is the second of those kind of sequences, if you will. So we typically start with the activation sequence. So it's great that you guys already talked about it here because that's about settling into your physical body and developing some trust with the universe and feeling at home here. Then once we do that, we get into what Richard Rudd, the founders of the Gene Keys, calls the coal face of his work, of the pantheon that he has put out to the world, which is this Venus sequence work. And it really has to do with opening your heart to the world, moving through the world in a way that you understand through eyes of lucidity that people are either asking for love, which sometimes does not sound like love, or they are sharing love. And the only way that we can get to that place to really and truly see is to move through the world with an open heart and a place of acceptance and with some sense of devotion. Then we get into the final part is what's called the pearl sequence, which is about your prosperity and about what you're bringing out into the world, which is where so many people want to go right out of the gate. But the issue is if you try and do that without an open heart, you're constantly going to be tripping yourself up over and over and over again as people trigger you and say things that activate your wounds. And that really is what the Venus sequence does. It's unpicking the weave of your wounding patterns that you developed throughout your childhood that allows you to see what is actually happening instead of seeing through the eyes of your story and your trauma.
So wildly powerful. So wildly powerful. And actually, I'll say that I don't want to like spoil this as we get into it, but the core wound also be in the Venus sequence, always also being your core vocation
Yes.
in the Pearl sequence, that blew my mind. And that's where I was like, oh, that's why, I mean, not why you have to do the Venus sequence first. It's not all about money and abundance, but I have my conscious Jupiter, so like kind of my money gate on a 3-line. So I'm like, money and the
Totally.
practical world, you know? So I am always thinking about like, how can we succeed here in this physical world? How can we work with that, the material? But when I realized that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense because if you want to, follow like use your gene keys at the highest expression, if you want to follow your design, if you just really want to do anything in alignment and then create abundance and prosperity from that, like you're going to have an open enough heart to live as you truly are and make the connections that feel authentic and real and give what you're supposed to give to the world, from that place of sincerity and being genuine and everything. And you just have to have an open heart for that. And I also want to say, I think it's funny that Richard Rudd is like, this is my piece de resistance because he's a
Mhm.
4-6 and like what is their journey in life? It's all about keeping their heart open, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and being in community. Yeah, there's something to be said, and it ultimately speaks to the wounded healer archetype of our deepest wound, which we'll get to, this sphere of the core wound becomes the very thing that drives our service out into the world and how we serve the whole. Like it is that transmutation that allows us to step into what we're here and meant to do.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm really excited then to talk about yours in 56, which, oh my God, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense from what I know so far, the context of your life. Okay, I'm excited. Mine's in 46.
Okay,
You can talk
got it.
about that too. But great. All right. So yeah, why don't we dive into the spheres then and how this actually flows? I know some of the spheres and I know we got some Dharma in there. So
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of start at the beginning of the Venus work and just briefly describe things. And as we do that, whatever questions you have, please like stop me, ask the questions, and we'll kind of dig in together. So it starts at what's called the sphere of your purpose. So if you're following along, looking at your hologenetic profile, it's the very bottom sphere that you're looking at there. And that sphere is one of a couple places in your profile that actually serves double duty, meaning that it is the end of the activation sequence, but it's also the beginning of the Venus sequence. This happens again, just as an example, with the very first sphere, which is called the sphere of your life's work. And the activation sequence turns into what's called the sphere of your brand when you get into the pearl sequence. So we can talk a little bit more about what that looks like. But basically, this is your purpose as it specifically relates to relationship. So, who you are here to bump into, how you're here to interact with them, and purpose, it's really important to understand. I think a lot of people confuse life's work and purpose. So, people say, what is my purpose? But I think oftentimes what they're actually saying is, what is my life's work? Because they want to know what they should be doing out in the world, right? Purpose has nothing to do with doing. It has everything to do with being. It is the quality of consciousness that you bring into your doing. So you could do literally anything in the world, but do you do it with equanimity? Do you do it with peace, right? Like what quality are you bringing to that doing? That is what your purpose represents. Um, and it's very grounded, it's very earthy. It has to like we have to fully inhabit our body to allow this purpose to show up because that's where these signals come from. We've got to learn, when am I being drawn out of center, especially in relationship? When am I being drawn out of center? And like you just said, I have the 56th gene key, which is distraction at the lower frequency. So, like, when am I allowing myself to be distracted by the needs of others or whatever may come? So,
hmm
that's sphere of purpose.
Wait, okay. So I do want to stop you there for a second though,
Yeah,
because
please.
I didn't mention this, everyone, but Jay and I were talking about this beforehand. His birthday is the day after mine. So we have the same incarnation cross, i.e., the same activation sequence. I'm gonna say sphere sequence, get
No
all
worries.
mixed up, but
Yeah.
same activation sequence in Gene Keys. So both of us have our unconscious earth, which is the purpose sphere in gate 60. And I was
Mhm.
going to ask you this separately, but honestly, I'm just going to ask you these as we go along because I think it's fun. How has this shown up for you as your purpose with gate 60, that, limitation? And then I actually don't remember the gift or the city,
Yeah, so
but
it's limitation, realism, and justice.
mm,
And this is one of the trickiest keys for myself personally to penetrate. It took years, literally, for this to start to open up inside of me, and it still continues to open. And the way that I talk about this gene key is ultimately justice here is talking about a sense of divine balance. So we as humans have perverted justice into like what we see as the justice system, which is us trying to enforce what we think is right. But we don't have a big enough picture to know what is right and the grand flow of things and in the universe. And so, where that leads you eventually is coming to this place of seeing everything as in divine balance. And so, our job for justice is to get out of the way and to allow the universe to redress the balance.
Mm.
And so, when we talk about limitation here, so many people want to think like, I'm not limited. How could I be limited? I'm this like divine being, right? Especially people in this space. But the reality is you are limited. We're all limited. And this may be a good place to say the shadow is not the enemy here. The shadow is what brings us closer to the city of justice. It's our teacher. It's part of our journey and part of our path. And so this limitation, like we all are subject to being in a human body, which our spirit, that is a giant limitation for our soul, right? And same goes for gravity. We're all walking around stuck to this planet, unable to fly away like the birds that we see. So to say that we're not limited is a farce.
Mhm.
Where we need to be careful or mindful is confusing the banks of the river with the river itself. In other words, we need to be careful not to attach ourselves to the structure or to the form of things and instead understand and see the energy that is trying to move through that form. That is what is real. So oftentimes, and I talk about this big time with people that get really attached to the gene keys or really attached to human design, they forget that these are all pointers to energy that are moving inside of our body and moving in the universe around us. And if you forget that, it gets really easy to get so serious and tight and bogged down in the details.
And so
And
dogmatic. Oh
it's
my
so
God. You
dogmatic.
see, I
Exactly.
mean, I'm going a little off topic here, but in particular, like with human design, I mean, it's a system that's known, and I'm sorry if anyone from the community is listening to this and gets upset, but it's a system in a community that's known for being so dogmatic. And for me, I see that so in the shadow of Gate 60 and also very much in the shadow of Gate 61 of like, I need to know how the world works and it needs to be this one way, and I will become like a zealot about this. When at the end of the day, like structure can be helpful when it helps us make decisions at the right time. And I have like an audio about this in my membership about how sometimes it's not the right time to push forward. And sometimes you truly are limited. And by accepting that, that's how you move forward. But other times the structure is really like, it's don't sacrifice function for form here. Like just anyway, yes, you said it much more eloquently than I did.
Well,
But
and you need structure. Like structure
yeah.
is necessary because that's how these universal currents, like that's what they move through.
Hmm.
So we need that. Like that's how prosperity is going to be able to flow into your life. Like when you're building a business, you're building a structure that allows prosperity to flow to you. But where we get into trouble is we get attached to that thing and we don't want to let it go. We don't want to let it shift or move or change. And then we're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, beautifully put. And I do have a question for you because it's really nice to talk to somebody else who has this exact same incarnation cross. Do you ever feel like sometimes you have to be like the wet blanket on people's dreams of like, they're like, anything is possible right now. And you're like, yeah, but right now, I don't know about that. I don't know if that was the best time. I feel
Yes.
bad, but I'm like, if you want my opinion, like that's what I'm
It,
going to tell you.
Same. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need to have somebody rip our feet back down to the earth so that we can see the actual next step instead of being lost in Never Never Land.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So that's the sphere of purpose where
Sphere of
this
purpose. Yep.
begins.
And so then coming up out of there, if you're unfamiliar with this system, when you're looking at the profile, you'll see all these different spheres that contain the gene key, and you'll see a number 1 through 64, a decimal point, and then a number 1 through 6, which is your line keynote. Um, and then connecting those are these lines, and those are what are called pathways, and they're more collective in nature. So the spheres contain your specific codes for awakening, if you will. And these pathways are more kind of zones that we all cross or walk through at various times of our journey. And this first one is actually our entire life, and it is the pathway of Dharma. So this connects our sphere of our purpose up to the next sphere we're going to get to is what's called the sphere of attraction, which is one that a lot of people are interested in. And so your Dharma, just in case anyone is uninitiated, your Dharma, think of this as like your soul contract. It is like the thing that you are here to do or accomplish this go around on the school of Earth. Not to be confused with the next pathway, which is what's called the pathway of karma, which is how we get feedback in order to develop our Dharma. So the way that I like to describe Dharma is like the acorn in the oak tree, right? We all come into this world as this acorn, but that acorn contains our highest expression, right? Our oak tree. And it's our work to figure out how can I bring that out into the world. And so often, because of our culture and our society, we think that we need to add things to ourselves. We need to go and we need to get more education. We need to take this certification. I need to have this specific knowledge. And what that ends up doing, I've been saying this a lot lately. If you've ever seen the movie The Christmas Story, where the kid is going out into the snow and he's got like his mom puts him in like 97 coats and he like can't put his arms down and he's like waddling side to side outside. That's what you're doing when you're trying to take in all these external things. You're like tightening it so that you can't fully express yourself. So your dharma and your purpose are actually about uncovering this innate wisdom and these innate skills that you have and that you can trust. But we're just told that we can't because everyone's trying to sell us something, essentially.
Yeah. Yep. Not really great. Not a great economical decision to tell people like you're good as you are. Don't need to change anything. It's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And
And no
so,
evolution would occur, right? Like these
yeah.
impulses that we have are very natural impulses because we have this drive to evolve. Because ultimately, I believe that we're trying to reunite with the Godhead, become one again. And without this impulse for evolution and to come into our Dharma, that would never happen. Like we've got to get it wrong over and over and over again so that we can learn what we need to learn. And that's largely what our Dharma is about.
Hmm. Okay, cool. So we take the path of Dharma from purpose to the attraction sphere.
Yes.
Okay.
And then now I want to get into sphere of attraction.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So sphere of attraction is one that has there's a lot out there, right? With the law of attraction and the book that, the gift and all of the things that people talk about in that realm and manifestation. And yes, there is a reality to those things. And you can tinker with your attractor field and you can manifest things in your life. However, I have a really big caveat there is you don't know what you're doing when you start tinkering with things like that. There are second, third, fourth order consequences that we just can't understand or know or see. And so what the sphere of attraction is actually about is your aura. It's about this field that surrounds us. And like the way that I like to kind of describe this is you walk into a waiting room and there's a person on the right side of the waiting room and there's a person on the left side of the waiting room. And you look over to the right and you've never seen this person before. They both look fairly generic, so it's not like the clothes that they're wearing or their style or anything like that. But you look to the right and you just are drawn to that person. There's like a magnet that pulls you over there to them, and you don't understand why. And then you look to the left and it's the opposite, right? It's like the other pole. It's like this repulsion, and that is happening from the field of your aura. So maybe it might be helpful now to talk about the energy bodies that we use in the gene keys. So they're called what are called the subtle bodies, and there's seven of them. I'll kind of start at the top and work my way down here. So the first is what's called the monadic body, and these higher ones are going to be a little bit esoteric, a little bit out there. So bear with me as I
This is
kind of.
where Richard Rudd takes me for a fucking ride. And the Gene Key,
Yeah.
when I was reading the 22nd Gene Key, and I was like, I'm happy or sad for you, but I'm not reading all that. I can't right now.
It's a lot, and that's really like the big differentiator in my mind between human design and Gene Keys is Gene Keys talks a lot more about what's what Richard calls the involutionary current, which is divinity, grace, reaching down to help you through your process of settling into your design, right? Like that's really the big difference is like taking some of the weight off, some of the pressure off that like, hey, this isn't all on you. You can relax, you can chill out, and there is a divine grace reaching down. So, seventh subtle body, monadic body, it basically is like the connective tissue of everything. So, like the term body isn't even really the right term here. It's really all of it. Coming a step down, we've got what's called the atmic body, and that's really divine mind. It's like it's truth. It is just the way things are, and it's an understanding that everything is exactly as it's meant to be. And then we go down another step, and it's what's called the Buddhic body. And your Buddhic body is like the body of ecstasy. It's the body of oneness. It's the body that connects all of us together. Then we go down another step, and it's the causal body, which is the body of your soul. It's the part of you that continues to reincarnate on a certain level. That's a relative truth, but it's your soul, for lack of a better term. Now, getting to like why I really wanted to talk about this, the next one down is what's called your mental body. And your mental body has resonance with the atmic bodies, which is divine mind. And then you've got your mental body, which is your mind, right? And the way you think about things and move through the world. What's really helpful in the way that Richard talks about it and the Gene Keys talks about it, in my view, is to understand that you've got a mental body, which is like take yourself and then through your aura, like on the outer part of your aura, there's this part of you that is at a certain frequency. And whatever frequency that thing is at, it's going to pick up on these thought forms that are just kind of floating around in the ether, right? So all of these different ideas. And depending on where my frequency is, dictates which of those ideas I'm going to pick up on and what I'm going to think and understand. So, a way that I can illustrate this for people is right now, think of a movie. Okay, cool. Movie popped into our mind. Now, did you like go to the filing cabinet in your brain that had all of the movies that you've ever seen and pull one down off of the shelf and look at it? No. Something just popped into your brain, right? There was a movie all of a sudden that was there. And that came because of your frequency right now was matched to that movie thought form that was flying around outside of you. If I asked you that same question tomorrow and you were in a different frequency in a different state, you would say a different movie. That's kind of the idea here. Then we go one more step down, and then that's what's called your astral body or your emotional body. And it's the same idea there. So, whatever frequency that astral body is at, there are these emotion forms that are floating around out there. And those, whatever we are, that's what we're going to attune to. And so, what you start to see when you really feel that truth is that we are like infinitely powerful and able to decide in any moment what we are feeling and what we are thinking by addressing our frequency. Now, it's a process, right? It takes time to raise our frequency and to shift how we're moving through the world. But ultimately, where we have control is in how we respond to these things that are coming to us. And that is what the sphere of attraction is all about. So it's about raising your frequency so that the emotions that you feel, so that the thoughts that you think shift. And if you believe in these teachings, and here, just to close the loop, the last body is the physical body. That's the seventh body. So this dense thing that holds, a lot of energy, a lot of stored stuff. So if we can raise our frequency, then the things that we're going to notice are going to be different. So people think that the sphere of attraction or the law of attraction has to do with changing the things that are coming to you. But in reality, it's about changing how you respond to those things. And when you are able to respond in line with your Dharma, to allow your karma to unwind, which is the next pathway that we're going to get to, that is how you gradually raise your frequency over time. So regardless of what happens, I choose to respond from a place of love. And when I do that, we start to get this feedback from the universe, and this field of synchronicity starts to show up around us, and all the people, all the things that we need to guide us towards our Dharma and to continue to open our heart begin to show up in our lives. But it all starts with this hard internal look of like, how am I thinking about and moving through the world? Am I a victim or am I free?
This is what I love about Gene Keys is how at the end of the day it is such radical self-responsibility, and it's all about, and why it probably isn't always also for everyone. Although Richard Rudd is much gentler in how he describes things than Ra is, and I think the
For sure.
systems themselves are such fascinating reflections of the people who channeled them.
Yes.
Because like you were saying before, with Richard Rudd, it's like the divine is here to hold you. Like life is here to hold you. If you let it, you just have to do your part. Raw is like, here's the system, you're on your own.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
totally.
smoke and hang out with my feral dog, and then like play guitar. But yeah, and I love this. This is one of the things I feel that Gene Keys really fills in the gaps for with human design. And it goes so far beyond that. I don't see it just as a supplementary system. I see it as something on its own. But with all of this said, I would love, because the sphere of attraction also has to do with like attracting the people, certain people into your life, right? And certain
Yeah.
kinds of relationships that you see a pattern with.
Yeah.
And so for you, you can like look at this from any perspective about, your attractor field or relationships, but I'd love to hear for you how that shows up with 29.6, because I'm kind of having a difficult time conceptualizing that. So what was that? How's that been for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So 29 is half-heartedness, commitment, devotion. And so that's really the key. Richard has a one-liner that I absolutely love, which is there is no difference between 99% commitment and 1% commitment.
Mm,
You are either in or you are out when it comes to commitment. And that was really the thing that cracked open my sphere of attraction. I was 99% committed in a lot of places in my life. And I really had to sit down and look and come to terms with the fact of like, I say I want these things, but the entirety of my being is not in line with the statement that I want them. And
mm,
once I was able to clean that up, which for me came through devotion, which is the city here, the highest expression of this is devotion. And for me, it's devotion to God. It's a devotion to, um, the fact that I am here as a very small and insignificant piece of the whole, and it's my duty to the best of my ability to show up in love and to try and help other people to show up in love in their lives. And when I did that, which for me involves a lot of devotional practices, so that's a big part of my sphere of attraction is, a lot of meditation, a lot of chanting, a lot of journaling, like all of those things were really, really important for me to bring this sphere of attraction online. And it's been a really beautiful process. Like just to tell a quick anecdote of like how this happens. Just a couple weeks ago, a woman that I had worked with reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I need to pause on the work that you do. I want you to know that it has been deeply impactful for me, but it's just feeling really heavy right now. And I like need to take a time out." And she's like, "I promise it has nothing to do with the money." Now, if my frequency were in a rough place, right, I immediately would have been like, "Oh no, I'm worried, I'm fearful, like what did I do?" All of those things, which is just we never get what we're seeking if that is our response to things. But instead, I just responded in love, and which is a reality of what I was feeling in that moment is like, I get it. I know how heavy this can be. I totally understand. And then the next thing out of her mouth was, "I really want your work to reach more people." And she offered me a five-figure gift to continue what I'm doing out in the world. And that is what I'm talking about with the sphere of attraction. It brings exactly what is needed when is needed, not so that you have what you want. That's really important with the sphere of attraction. It is there so that you can continue to move towards your Dharma and continue to turn into that oak tree. It doesn't bring you what you want, it brings you what you need.
Hmm.
And when you understand that, it makes it easier to respond in that higher frequency.
Mm. That's also such a six line way of looking at it too. This being on, your attraction sphere. Well, you have quite a few six lines in your chart.
A
So,
lot of sixes.
yeah, like
Yeah.
in important placements, especially when we're talking about gene keys. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's really beautiful. And it's unsurprising to me that when you feel like you're activating this at the higher level, that's how you look at it, right? Because with the six line, it's all about like how you're saying, I'm just one little, nugget here in the big pile of nuggets that is the universe. Also so six lined, right? Like guys, at the end of the day, it's much bigger than us. I
Yeah.
see this from the roof. Yeah, because I've been thinking about my attraction sphere. Mine is on 27 on line 3. And it has been something that's been harder for me to figure out, but I'm excited to see it open up. I know that with the 3 line, it's about like accepting that your heart opens and closes and just like watching that. And I do know that you need humor with this, which luckily I'm pretty good at. I'm pretty good at having a sense of humor about all this.
And that's
But
like the
yeah.
number one, I would say, like, that is the thing. If you cannot laugh at yourself and the universe through this process, you're never going to be able to raise your frequency. You're just going to constantly trip yourself up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. And so we take this. Then the next path is the path of karma.
Path of karma. Yep. So that runs from this sphere of attraction and connects us up to the sphere of the IQ, which is honestly really where the Venus work starts in earnest, is with that sphere of IQ. But let's talk about that pathway of karma just quickly, because I feel like most people know or have at least heard the term karma before. So, karma, ultimately, a lot of people think of it as cause and effect, and that is part of it, right? It's an understanding that if you've ever heard of the Akashic record in the East, or like in the Bible, it's called the Book of Life. But this place where everything is recorded, right? Not just your actions, not just the things that are happening on the outer planes, but every thought that you have, every emotion, all of your intention, all of that stuff gets recorded. And so your karma is about starting to unwind all of those things that you have recorded through all of your lifetimes, to come back into this place of having an open heart that's going to allow you to come back into unity with the whole. Now, karma is the teachings and the gene keys are really interesting. So when we die, we go to this place that's called the Bardo states, which Richard took from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And when you go to these Bardo states, basically, remember those subtle bodies that I talked about, physical, astral, mental, etc. When you go to the Bardo states, there's this kind of separating process that happens. So you pass, your physical body goes back to Gaia, goes back to the earth. All of those resources are recycled in that way. Your astral body gets split essentially into two. So all of an astral, remember, is your emotional stuff. So all your desires, your sexuality, like all of that is kind of tied here. All of the higher frequency energy gets sucked up into your causal body, which, if you remember, is like your soul, right? It's the part of you that keeps coming back. And in that way, your soul gets a little bit brighter and a little bit lighter and a little bit closer to reunion with God. All the not so great or lower vibrational stuff that happened through your astral body gets kicked back into the collective karma. And in the Gene Keys teachings, that collective karma lives in what scientists call your junk DNA or non-coding DNA. So we have 90% of our genetics. We we look at it as junk, like it doesn't code for anything. It's just sitting there. And Richard believes, and the teaching is that that is holding our experience from the Big Bang on, right? So all of our growth, and growth's not the right term, but evolution of going from a single cell to plant to multi-cell to fungi, like all of that is contained here. And all of the fear and all of the ancestral lineage and all of the war and all of that is just sitting there in your DNA. And so this pathway of karma is here to bring things to us as like these little packets. It's really easy to think about in relationship, right? Like you get into this new relationship and you're like, oh my God, this feels amazing. This person is incredible. Like, you know, the honeymoon phase, right? But the universe is sneaky, and each one of those relationships holds this little box of karma that then begins to open up. And then you're like, oh shit, this person is not the person that I thought they were. And it gets hard and tricky. And like, you got to really work at it and open your heart and like, you know, all the things that we need to do in relationship. And that karma is brought to us by the universe so that it moves us closer to our Dharma, so that we can continue to open our heart and continue to be the beings that we are meant to be. And so this pathway of karma, once we have transmuted our own karma and the karma that we have created and carried forth, then we get to the real work, which honestly is a very heavy burden and is can kind of feel unfair. But the reality is, there are certain beings that are here to help transmute this karma for the collective, this karma for the whole. And in doing that, gradually over time, the what Richard calls the future human, and I know Ra has spoke about this too, this kind of new in 2027, this new thing that is coming to us. Like that's what we're doing by reprocessing all of this old collective karma. So that's what this pathway is all about. It's about understanding that everything that is happening for a reason. It's happening because of a cause. The tricky part is the cause is on the other side of the veil, meaning we can't see it oftentimes. We don't know what it is. And so we sometimes fight against it. We see ourselves as a victim because we don't have a full picture. And so we got to learn how to work with it, how to understand it.
What's the planetary placement for the IQ? I can't remember. Is it a Mercury
I
placement?
can't remember either, honestly.
Okay.
I don't
Wait,
know.
can you
So,
can you just tell me
but
which one yours is and then I can find it on the human design chart?
what gene key it is?
Yeah, man.
46, your core.
That's right. Okay, let me see where it is here. And then that's your conscious Venus placement.
And yeah, so one interesting thing about me is that I have like zero fluency with astrology, which is interesting. I think a lot of people, I came into this in a very different way than I think many people come into it. And for better or worse, I fought and still continue sometimes to fight, kicking and streaming against the fact that this is an astrological system, which is hilarious because I base my entire life around opening into it.
Yeah, it's because it's so easy to not see it through both of these systems. I mean, I came into human design knowing nothing about astrology. I'm learning more about it now.
Yeah.
And it is funny when I remember I posted something back when I was on TikTok, I posted something about human design and like what it was basically. And this one guy was like, sounds like basically you're just talking about astrology. And I was like, I see where you're coming from, sir. And he's like, no, people in astrology can get like really upset about human design, which
For
like I
sure.
understand, it's fair. But yeah, just looking at your human design chart and the planetary placements there, it's in 46. So the karma leads up to your IQ then,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So what is the IQ sphere?
Yeah, so as I said, this is where it really gets real with the Venus sequence work. This is, remember, where I said this is ultimately about unpicking the weave of your wounding patterns, and this is where that process begins. So the Gene Keys takes a look at our childhood development in 7 year cycles, which is actually pretty much agreed upon. Like if you were to go to the psychological literature, they pretty much look at things in 7 year cycles of development as well. And we do it in reverse, meaning we first, through the sphere of your IQ, look at patterns that you developed from 14 to 21 years old. And then when we get to the next sphere, we're going to look at 7 to 14, and then the sphere after that, 0 to 7. So this sphere of your IQ is a pattern that you developed sometime between 14 and 21. So when you're contemplating this sphere, it can be really helpful to go back to that time in your life and to just get out a journal, write down some big things that happened then, some different ways that you were thinking, you know, that kind of thing. And what it represents is a mental pattern. that you took on when you got like really intensely emotionally charged to like a place where you couldn't handle it, right? It just was like too much juice. And so you created a thought, a way of thinking that helped to dispel some of that energy. So it's like a intellectual set of glasses that we put on that turns into a worldview. And we start to not even notice that those glasses are there because it's been part of the way that we think for so long. And so the sphere of your IQ is about maybe for the first time seeing that, like seeing that you have had this lens over your vision and that you are not actually seeing what is present and what is really happening a lot of the time is then when somebody triggers that same pattern, you immediately go back to the 16-year-old version of yourself and you clamp down, you dig in. Everyone's a little bit different, right? We talk about in the gene keys, we talk about the repressive tendency, which is going to be someone who is more like withdrawn or goes within or shuts down. Or then we talk about the reactive tendency, which is someone that like goes into denial and blame and projects out whatever is happening inside of them. So you got to kind of know which of those you are, and you can be different versions in different spheres, even different versions in different times. So don't feel like you need to be locked in to one of those things. And so the sphere of our IQ is a mental contemplation that we start with because it's the closest to the surface, right? We're most comfortable, especially in the West, although the East is quickly catching up, to be in our minds. And so it can be the easiest to deal with and to see and to understand. And the IQ really, you kind of need to think about the EQ at the same time. So if it's okay, can I loop that in now
Yeah,
too?
please.
Okay. So connecting those two spheres, the pathway that connects them at the higher frequencies, that pathway is called the pathway of intelligence. And at the lower frequencies, it's called the pathway of defense. And that says a lot about what's happening here. So when we're in the lower frequency, it's all about defending ourselves, like protection, because we're scared, we're in fear of something. And ultimately, that something, most of the time, is you're worried that somebody else is going to be able to harm you in some way, shape, or form. And so we get into this like tight defensive strategy. At the higher frequencies, the pathway of intelligence allows us to balance between our IQ and our EQ. And that's why I really need to talk about these two things at the same time. So,
Mhm.
your EQ is this pattern that comes on sometime between 7 and 14. And oftentimes, this can come from a really intense emotionally charged situation. So, similar to like what I just said with the IQ, more common though, it comes from a sense of physical insecurity or not feeling safe physically. And so we get this really, really big charge emotionally. And now it's this emotional pattern that we take on in the world. And so this, I feel, because again, people aren't as comfortable with their emotion as they are with their thought. An example might be helpful here. For me, I have the sixth gene key here, which at the shadow is conflict, the gift is diplomacy, and the city is peace. So my pattern, when I got triggered emotionally, was a pattern of conflict, meaning I am going to fight,
I
whether
was about
that
to
be with,
say, you're gonna punch some people out.
yes, whether that be with my words or when I was younger, it was absolutely physical. Like I fought a lot when I was a kid. Um, and so it's this like, because I feel like I need to protect myself so much, all I can do is like start to pick on another person or whatever needs to happen. And what I learned through that though is this understanding that on some deep, deep level, what am I protecting myself from? Like if I am you and you are me, like I'm trying to protect the wrong thing here. And so when you understand that, it allows some space and some we can respond differently in that present moment. So basically, what we are trying to do with our sphere of our IQ and EQ is balance the two of those things. Because if I am overly emotional, people are not going to be, there's no form, right? Going back to that 60th, there's no structure, there's no way for it to come across. So it's just like mushy. Whereas if I am too intellectual, I'm too sharp. I'm not going to actually connect with someone. They're not going to actually be able to hear me. So IQ and EQ are about balancing. When do I need to add more of my astral body? When do I need to add more of my mental body? So that when I interact with myself, because this is ultimately about self communication first and foremost, and when I'm interacting with others, like what what can I do to remember that I'm not a victim? That like my interacting with other people in relationship is here to unwind my karma and to move me closer towards my Dharma.
Cool. And so you have that EQ in the sixth gene key. So that's when you were younger from 7 to 14, right?
Yep.
And then so you have your IQ in 46, which is
Mhm.
the shadow of seriousness, gift of delight, and
Delight.
then the city of
Ecstasy.
ecstasy. Okay. So how did that show up for you? Did you just become very, very serious?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was this. My story is pretty wild and crazy. I grew up in an addict home. I turned into a heroin addict for a lot of years. And so, when I was 16, I cannot tell you how serious my life felt. And it carried from there. It just got tighter and tighter and more structured. And then it got to a place, even when I was able to get into recovery and get to the other side of that addiction, I felt like if I let myself enjoy life or stray at all, that I was going to go back to the way that I was before. And so I had a decade of like, I need to be like hyper focused and hyper in control of everything that is happening in my life. And that just sucks the joy, it sucks the delight out of being here on this planet. Like there are so many moments of bliss and awe, and you miss all of it when you are locked in to this seriousness.
I know that so well. That's one of like the heaviest things that I deal with the 46th gene key in my chart, especially being my core wound. It's something I have to come back to over and over again. And I'm interested. I know that you were in the armed forces for a while. Was that because it gave you that sense of like rigidity and structure?
Absolutely. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was like an overcorrection back to like, I need discipline. And it was my way of getting that. And also at that stage of my development, I was still focusing on the external circumstances. So it was like, how can I run away from the external circumstances, thinking that that was the problem, right? It was my environment that put me into this situation, when in reality, as I learned eventually, because I kept running from different things and trying different things, and always came back to that same feeling inside of just like this deep, for me, it's like a numbness, and it's at the same time, it's like a feeling of panic, like this, the world could fall apart at any moment and everything is not going to be okay.
Hmm. Yeah. Mine is I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like the thing that I probably run from is this sense that like everything is empty, but and on the other side of that, also like everything's way too much and I'm just not going to
Yeah,
be able to handle that, which is
totally.
very like gate 36, which I have in my chart as well. Like it is a crisis and I'm just like not going to be able to handle it. It's too much life. I'm just like not adequate to deal with that. But yeah, cool. All right. So we have that pathway and then we have the EQ.
Yep.
And then do we move into the core wound or is there more from there?
SQ from there.
SQ, okay.
So now coming out of the EQ, which remember, I recommend the same thing. That EQ pattern came on 7 to 14. So really taking a look at that timeline and thinking about like, and you'll notice this emotional pattern still right now when things get really intense. How are you responding in those moments, and starting to unpick and unwind that? So then we leave the sphere of EQ and we go to it's called the pathway of love, coming out of the EQ and connecting to the sphere of your SQ. And it's the only pathway I think that doesn't have a lower frequency keynote to it. So because this is connecting your SQ, if you overlay a Gene Keys profile on a human body, the SQ just sits right on top of your heart. So this is all about like getting back in touch with your heart and starting to thaw all of that protection that you have put up from those wounding patterns that you've taken on over the years. And so your SQ 0 to 7, uh, is intimately linked to your physical body. And so this is where, like, we talk about trauma being stored in the body. This is really what we're talking about here is like these physical patterns and like the physical, like, how are we carrying ourselves? Like, what's the structure of our spine? Um, it has a lot to do with a return to innocence and a return to joy and just knowing that life is about love and it's about having fun and so this is again a pattern that came on. Oftentimes, honestly, it has to do with the core wound, which we'll get to in a second. But basically, what it means is there isn't even anything that necessarily needed to happen in your life. Just from being born into separateness, right? We go from this place of unity as a soul, and then we're born into this world where we're in duality. There are parts of us that are not unified, and that is really uncomfortable for us. And so just inherently we don't feel safe. Like even if you look at young children, if you have young children and you look at a 4-year-old, you might not notice it in them, that underlying kind of something's not right. And I think why you don't notice it is that they haven't even developed a sense of I yet. Like in the literature, it's really clear that we don't fully inhabit our physical body until we're about 7. So like we don't see a boundary. Like when we're 3 years old, our mom and us are the same thing. There is no difference between those things. But even though it's not expressing, that sense of like something's not right and I'm not safe, it's in there. It's in there as a seed and it's just like waiting to show itself. And so this is about really going back and really trying to warm your heart back up and all the different line keynotes here. So I'm a fifth line here, which is keynoted mentorship. And it's like role models with integrity, I think is the sub keynote here.
And then
And
wait, let me pull up. And so then for you, it's 35. So day
Mhm.
35 too.
Yep.
Okay.
35-5. So my 35 there is hunger, adventure, boundlessness. And the fifth line and all of the lines, this is important if as you're kind of looking at your profile, that line keynote there, which you can get lots of different places. We can kind of address that if we need to. That's what you needed from 0 to 7 years old. And I know for me, that was the opposite of what I got. And for a lot of people that I've talked to, it's the opposite of what they got. And I just want to make sure that people understand just because you didn't get it then doesn't mean you can't give it to yourself now. It's not over. There is a piece of us that is beyond time. I believe the fifth gene key has the city of timelessness. And so we have this ability to give our younger selves this thing that we need. And that really is the work of your SQ and the heart opening process that needs to happen here. And when it comes as a flood. Like when this heart opens, I'm telling you, you are going to sit there and bawl your eyes out like a child. At least I did. Like it is an intense, intense feeling when I went 30 years of feeling nothing, nothing. Like I was in war. I have a 14-year-old daughter who, like, one of the things that haunted me is I felt nothing when my daughter was born. And like, that was a moment for me where I was like, something is very wrong with what I am doing in the world and how I'm moving through the world. And with all of this work, yeah, when that flood, when that emotion came, it was like a very intense, intense thing. Um,
With 35, I know that it sounds like you were very much in the repressive shadow of 35 of like it's really just not safe to
yeah,
feel part of life
totally.
and to experience life, which is so funny because with 35, I know a lot of people who have the reactive version of that and it's like off to fly to Shanghai,
Yes.
and then Bali, and then I'll come back, and then I'll fuck this person, and then then I'll go on this show. It's like that's their life is just the total opposite of that. So it's interesting to meet somebody who did have the repressive version of it, but yeah, and so I'm assuming it sounds like that's kind of how it felt for you, and then there's something else I was going to say about that. What was mine? I just wanted to share mine, I guess.
Yeah, please.
Mine is third is 53, which I know the shadow's immaturity, and then it's
I
like
know the city is
growth,
super abundance.
super
I
abundance.
can't remember what that gift is though.
Yeah, whatever. We'll just skip the
No.
guess, get to the city. But I know that it's is it freedom? I know that there's like this sense of freedom and like expansiveness with 53, or like maybe it's growth or something like that. And I have it on line 4, expansion.
Expansion.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense. Yeah, and I'm thinking back to like where that was in, when I was young. I did not. I'm the youngest of three, and just anyone listening, like my life's definitely not as hard as Jay's was growing up. I had a life of much more privilege, if we're being honest, and stability. But I'm looking back, like, I always did like have this feeling of being really trapped, which I know is why I fear being trapped in relationships now. Besides the fact that like my sphere of attraction's on a line 3, which is like, you're great, time to drive. Bye bye.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Got other
leaving
stuff
now.
to do.
Yeah, I got other other people to see, places to be. But I know that when I was young, I really did feel like I wanted to expand and just like be big. I've always been a person with a very big personality and a lot of energy. But I had a dad who was very protective. He was a lovely person, so was my mom, but it was very much like like no expansion here. You are the youngest child. You have basically two sets of parents because my brother and my sister are 8 and 10 years older than me. And, that's not like, it's not level 10 trauma in my opinion, but that is, what I felt when I was younger was like, one day I really want to break free from this, but I don't feel like I can. And it was like very suffocating. Now that I'm looking at this now, that's what I can pick up from it at the moment. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that it is a place. It's like a deep, deep, deep. When you contact the shadow of your SQ, it's like deep in there. You're gonna be like, oh, that's something that I have been feeling and noticing and maybe not able to put a word to for like a very, very long time, or maybe ever.
Mm. Yeah. And now that I'm actually saying this, if I could add just like one more thing,
Of course.
my fear always has been as a 5-1, I'm always afraid of like it's ever telling anyone anything about myself. So I'm like, how are you gonna use this against me?
Mhm.
But how are you gonna try to get into my aura? But two, like my fear has always been that people don't see me as a grown up. Like they don't see me as an adult, they see me as immature. And
Mhm.
so in one way or another, it's been like trying to, and then I have that 46 too of seriousness. So it's like in one way or another, it's trying to like, no, that's not who I am. No. And not just embracing maybe that sometimes I am immature, maybe like a lot of the time, who knows? Who's to say? You're probably not, I'm probably not the best decider of that. But yeah, that's all fascinating. So
And remembering too, like just to remind people, because I think it's such a common thing of like, how can I get out of the shadow? And that is just not like, no, the shadow is your friend. It's your guide. It's a helpful part of your experience and of your journey. And so turning towards that and letting it in and making friends with it is ultimately how we continue to grow and develop and shift.
yeah, yeah, good point. Always.
And another thing you said that might be helpful is like, a lot of times your gene keys might show up, especially with the Venus sequence, in people that you are in relationship around you. So,
Mm.
like you just said, like other people seeing you as immature, or even you seeing immaturity in another, like these are all ways that the gene keys can talk to us. Like it's not all internal, it is environmental in some ways too.
Yeah, that's a good point because especially as a I know you're not an astro fiend, but especially as a Capricorn rising, they say that we really Benjamin Button our way through life. So we start off as like very serious and then
Yeah.
we just get a little bit less so as we go on. And so I mean, I was telling my friend, this is so funny, like from a young age when kids would just be being immature, I'm like, you guys are being dickheads, follow the rules. Like this is serious stuff. I hate immaturity. Like I've always hated it. I hate it to this day. Can't
Yeah.
stand it.
Yeah.
But probably a reflection of, how much I dislike that in myself. And isn't that always the case with us?
Always.
Anyway. So, yeah, and so I guess that takes us to the core wound and the
Yeah.
pathway there.
Yeah, and that takes us to the end of the Venus work, so we're almost there. Hang on if you're listening. So yeah, the pathway here is what's called the pathway of realization, and it's a really intense pathway. It takes us back into the womb space. It takes us back to the divine mother, and in that way, it's very deep. So your core wound ties to your period of gestation, right? So 0 to 9 months in your mother's womb. And it has a lot to do, this pathway of realization, with realizing what is real in the world and what is Maya or illusion in the world. And it has to do with sealing your five senses, which is an old Eastern tradition of the senses used to be called the five thieves, right? They were the things that were stealing us, which ties intimately to my 56th in my core wound of distraction, right? The five senses are the things that pull us out of what is actually real, right? This soul space, this thing that is beneath or above maybe whatever the 3D world. And so sealing off those five senses means we start to spend more of our time in our internal space instead of in the external space. And so the core wound is very interesting. Another name for it is the sacred wound. And it comes about from nothing that happened in your life. So this nothing that your
Mm.
parents did, it's no big or little t trauma that happened. It is planted because, like I was saying before, we are born into separateness. We're born into this world where, when we're on the other side, we feel at one with everything, and we are one with everything. And then we come here, and every desire, every drive, every longing that we have, if you really keep following that thread all the way back, is the desire to come back into union or unity with the one. And so that's what the core wound is. It's this knowing that while we inhabit this physical body, we can't, on some level, all of us cannot be back there. Like we're part spirit, part animal here. And so the core wound ultimately is what it helps us to do is to be compassionate or even empathic on a really, really deep level, because you start to see that people's behavior has nothing to do with them. On some level, it is because we all inside of us have this same deep, deep wound that we are trying to heal. Some people know about it, some people don't know about it. But if you're somebody that knows about it, I can look at somebody else's maybe immature behavior and I can see so clearly why they're behaving that way, right? And I can just know and understand, and then I don't have to react. I can return one of the sayings from the Venus sequence is, how can you return non-love with love? And one of the only ways that I know to do that is to see and understand, which is the fourth gift, is like to understand like why somebody is behaving how they're behaving. And below that core wound, the six lines of the core wound are really important. Um, so I'm the first line there. Let's see if I can get all these shooting from the hip. I'm pretty sure I can. But that first line is the line of repression. And that's what I have there. So this is basically what we're repressing is the fact that we are born into separateness. It is the fact that on some deep, deep level, there is this unease or this fear, this discomfort that we feel, and we will do anything to not feel it. And if you don't believe me, get all your headphones away, no TV, no nothing, and just sit there for 20 minutes. And I promise you, inside of that 20 minutes, you are going to start to feel really uncomfortable. And that is the core wound. That is this thing that just doesn't feel right. And so we'll do anything. We have sex with people, we go out and we engage with substances, we buy things, we whatever, so that we don't have to feel that. And then the next piece is denial. So I repress it. Once I kind of notice it, Like for me as a line one, I can notice it. For a line two, they're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. They're going to blame another person for them feeling the way that they're feeling in that moment, right? It's
I'm
like,
aligned too for my core wound.
exactly. So it's very much like, no, no, no way. This is not me. This is like not how I move. And honestly, that second line energy is what leads to violence. It's like because it's the other person and it's their fault. Then we get into the third line, which is shame. So I deny and then I'm ashamed, right? Like there's this deep, deep shame that comes over us. And this is different from guilt. This shame is like, oh man, the shame is more personal in nature. It more has to do with like what you or your lineage has done throughout time. Then we move to the fourth line which is about rejection. And it's about like we're worried that we're not going to be accepted out in the world. And then we get to the fifth line, which is about guilt. And this guilt is more collective, so different from the shame, in that it's just like the guilt of being human. Like we look around and we're like, how are there still people starving in the world? How are we still having wars? Like it's this like intense feeling. And then finally, the sixth line is this feeling of separation. It's a feeling that like I am different from everyone else. Nobody else understands me, nobody gets it, and therefore I disengage from everything and just am a totally different being. And it's an interesting to like think about the story in reverse. So we feel separate, which makes us feel guilty. When we feel guilty, we want to reject ourselves and other people. That rejection causes us to feel ashamed. We deny that shame and then we repress that denial. Like it's so clear to see this story show up in the world. And so this sphere, this core wound, it's it's a lifetime to get to it, to unpack it, and to start to work with it and transmute it. Now, it's a process, right? And it will start to open. And when it does, that's when our vocation starts to open and we're able to press that opening into service to kind of close that loop to where we began this conversation.
hmm Nice. Very cool. So, all right, with your core wound in 56.1, so I feel like that plays so perfectly into your past, especially with, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth here to your own story, but with drug addiction and then the repression, and then even how your 35 is expressing itself, and that's a repressed version instead.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to, like, why do so many people turn to drugs? And
Yeah.
for anything that distracts you with 56 that you're hoping will take you to that city of intoxication, but just keeps you distracted. You
Mhm.
know, that's it. You don't want to feel something. You don't want to feel something that's bad. You want to be distracted from that. You're hoping that you'll get to that beautiful gift of feeling intoxicated, but instead it just really takes the other way. Yeah, and I think that's it's so cool when I see something in someone's chart and I'm like, wow, that really hit the nail on the head. For me, I'm trying to think with 46, you saying that this is a lifetime of work and sometimes it can feel really heavy and deep in there. It's so funny to me because this is one of those things where I'm like, Ariana, just lighten up. Like it's not that hard. Just
Mhm.
don't get so in your head all the time. Just live in your body. But that is the core wound of like, I can't trust my body. I can't trust what just feels good. I can't, let myself just feel good because then I'll go do heroin again. So I have to, be in a very structured environment. Man, yeah, it's so accurate.
Yeah, and it like that hunger really for me, it like now I know it's a hunger for reunion, right? It's a hunger for God. But at the time, it was a hunger to not feel empty. And when you pair that hunger to not feel empty with distraction, it is a potent combination. And you nailed it. Like it, my life journey is that in a big and meaningful way.
Yeah. I was just thinking I would love to meet someone who has their core wound in 33 because like that's so all about remembering that we're here to get back to the one. So I'd love to meet somebody who has experienced the shadow and is like in at least the gift of that or something. If that is
Yeah.
you, comment
And
down
that
below.
and that's interesting. So 33, 56, and 12 in the gene keys are what are called stop codons.
Mm,
So these are places in our genetics. Stop codons is like the period at the end of a genetic sentence, right? So we have this line of code that is our DNA, and it tells us what protein we need to make. And then so that the body knows that it's the end of the code, it gives like a little period that says, okay, now take this, go translate it, and go make this protein that we need to make. But if you look at Hermetic philosophy and the law of correspondence, which says as above, so below, or as within, so without. If that's the case in our DNA, then that is also reflected in the world around us. So these stop codons are opportunities for us to stop and to look around and to see, like, what is it that I need to do differently that is stopping my evolution or growth as a soul? Because it is like that first, and the gene keys, it's called the ring of trials, those three stop codons. And these are trials that we have to pass through. So that 33rd is the trial of forgetting who and what we really are. And then once we remember who and what we are with 33, then we've got the trial of distraction, right? It's like, can we actually stay with that, or do we get distracted by the outer world and go back to our forgetting? And then once we do that, then we've got to pass through that 12th, which at its city is purity, which is all about, can I let go of my ego, more or less? Can I see that? Can I let go of even all of the gifts, right? At towards the end, we've got to let go of even the gifts, because the word city in Sanskrit is actually has a negative, or can have a negative connotation to it, because these were seen as like superpowers that distracted you from actually reuniting with the one, right? Like the
mm,
35th gene key is the city of boundlessness. And so if you think of what that city means, boundlessness means we are not bound by space or by time. So if that city dawns in you, you are literally able. So if you've ever heard of the being that is Babaji, if you've ever read like autobiography of a yogi, this is an archetype, an avatar who just can show up at any time, at any place, and has over hundreds of years. And so boundlessness, we can move through time and space. We can time travel. I can teleport with this city. And so if I have that power, that's going to be a really hard power for me to let go of. But it's
mm.
that very thing that is stopping you from merging back into the Godhead, from back into the one. So even these cities at a certain point are here to be let go of. It's we need to be careful of spiritual bypassing. A lot of people want to jump right to the city, and that's not how this works. You got to walk the process.
Yeah, so I guess that it's a good thing I've never honestly cared about getting to the city. I'm just like, I just want to survive here. But I love that perspective and have never heard it, especially because if that's the case, then that neutralizes the shadow so much, right? Because like if even the city has, I don't want to say negative aspect to it, but this aspect that eventually you're going to have to move out of, like it's this circular thing and they're equal, right? Like
Right.
there is no
Right.
good or bad here. And like who better to show us that than a six line in his true six line nature. But God, that is so cool. And Jay, thank you so much for this. This has been one of my favorite episodes to record. I have to tell
Oh,
you, learned
thank
so
you.
much. And also, so you have something coming up that I want everybody to know about because it's really cool. So do you mind telling us a little bit about it?
Yeah, of course, of course. So, yeah, just a couple of ways to connect. I've got a YouTube channel by my name, which is Jay Cohen, Jaycohen, and I put out a ton of free stuff there. I also do a free, what I call wisdom call every couple of weeks there. So you just show up, ask any questions that you have about your gene keys, about your profile. Honestly, I don't do readings, even in like my day-to-day life. It's not something that the gene keys for me are this internal path of internal discovery. And so in the work that I do with people, I'm constantly pointing them back to themselves and helping them to understand that they have this wisdom inside of them. So I'm not going to give you a Gene Keys reading on that wisdom call, but I can help you ask some better questions that might open some things up inside of you. So those are free ways. And then starting at the beginning of June, I've got a cohort. I'm going to be starting with 15 people. And this is actually the first time I'm even talking about this publicly. So more to come, but I'm going to be taking 15 people through the Venus work on the one hand. And then my co-facilitator is a PhD neuroscientist who is going to help us work with the nervous system and actually contacting these energies that are very much in our bodies, right? A lot of this work is getting our nervous system to chill out, calm down, get into a parasympathetic state so that we can actually see what's happening and start to release. Remember, I said your purpose is underneath all of this stuff. So we're going to go through this process of spending about a month, excuse me, with each of the different spheres of the Venus work. And as we do that, we're going to pair different parts and pieces. So the goal by the end is to get to an understanding, at the very least, of your childhood wounding. It might, full disclosure, depending on what's going on, it might not be totally unwound, right? It can be a process, but we're at least going to have an understanding so that we can see it. And then concurrently to doing that deep limiting belief work, shadow work, all of that kind of stuff, starting to develop some stability, we're also pairing that with creativity. So I believe that we've got to start to tune back into our innocence and to our joy, and like we've got to stop looking outside of us and instead allow what's inside to bubble up and come out into the world. And when we do that, it can be our greatest teacher because we start to get feedback and we start to feel different things. And so concurrently to this deep inner work, we're also going to be working through a process of what is it that I want to be doing that is of greatest service to the whole. And so I want you to have an idea and to begin to sharpen your sword. So within this container, we're going to have opportunities for people to share what they're working on and share their gifts. Like, for example, I have a woman that I work with now, Marcy, who does family constellation work, which is an amazing therapeutic modality. And she's been able to figure out within the container that is ending in a month or so, how she's going to bring this out into the world. And that's another part of what we're going to be doing here. So more to come on that, but it'll start in June, and keep your eye on the YouTube channel if you have any interest, because that's where stuff will be.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, and all the information will be below too if you guys need it, all of Jay's links and everything. But that sounds so powerful. I'm really excited for that. There's so much stuff in there. And of course, like the Venus sequence, it obviously covers so much and then leads into other things. But okay, well, Jay, thanks again for coming on and sharing all your wisdom.
My pleasure, Ariana. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. You rock, everyone listening. You rock, and I'll talk to you next time.